Okay, well, welcome everyone. I think a few folks are still joining us, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight on the eve of the Thanksgiving holiday, whatever that looks like this year. Really pleased to welcome you and talk to you a little bit about the Fulbright U.S. Student Program tonight. This session is being recorded so that we can share it with anybody who isn't able to join us live. So I'm Leanne Adam, and our office is the National and Global Scholarships Advising Service at OSU. And here's our website at topscholars.oregonstate.edu. In our office, we have me, the coordinator of National and Global Scholarships Advising, and my colleague who's here with us tonight also is Ashley Weibel, who is a graduate assistant and a master's student in the College Student Services Administration program. And she's going to talk to you a bit about the Fulbright program, as she is also a Fulbright alum herself, who did an ETA in Columbia last year. So a bit more about our office. Here's where you can follow us on Instagram. We have this awesome, brand shiny new Instagram account where we're posting scholarships and deadlines and tips, and most importantly, scholar profiles. So you can learn more about the scholarships, but also the students who have received scholarships and taken advantage of some of these amazing opportunities. So our office advises on a whole bunch of different scholarships. The focus of tonight's meeting is Fulbright, but we also advise on the Boren Awards, Gilman Scholarship, Udall, Critical Language Scholarship, Goldwater, Truman, Marshall, Rhodes, Gates, Cambridge, a whole bunch of them, that Stanford Knight Hennessy Scholars Program. So we welcome you to meet with us and talk about any of these. What do? We meet with students individually, and we love just to get to know you and hear about your interests and aspirations and match you with opportunities. So we explain the application process and serve as a support person to you step by step through the entire thing. So it might feel a little bit daunting or intimidating to approach one of these national or international scholarship competitions, but I'd like to reassure you that we provide a lot of support for students who decide to go on this journey and are really happy to hear about your interests and learn about what you're hoping to do on your programs and provide as many insights as we can, having worked many years with different scholarships like these ones, and we're happy to pass those insights on to you. We also read and give feedback on your application materials, including personal statements, statements of grant purpose. We love to talk through with you your choice of recommenders, help you make connections abroad for Fulbright. We coordinate the nominations on the part of OSU. So the US Student Fulbright Program requires an endorsement from OSU, and we coordinate that whole process so that we help you put forward your best, most competitive applications possible, but also secure OSU's endorsement for your Fulbright application. And for Fulbright and other scholarships that might require an interview, we're happy to help you prepare for those as well. So we invite you to follow us on Instagram and check out our website for further information on Fulbright and other scholarships that we work with. But for now, I'm going to invite Ashley to speak to you a bit about the Fulbright program, and then we're going to leave lots of time for our Fulbright alumni who have joined us tonight to talk about their experiences with the Fulbright program. Ashley?
Good evening, everyone. So as Leanne mentioned, my name is Ashley, and I was a Fulbright ETA to Columbia in 2019 to 2020. So tonight I'm just going to share a little bit of information with you all about the history of the program and about the application process. So the Fulbright program was first created in 1946 by the US Congress. And so it is in part a federally funded program. And it's also administered by the Institute of International Education, which is a 501 organization. And then it's also administered overseas by binational commissions and US embassies. And so it's a joint effort in terms of funding and administration, both by the United States and the different host countries. And the overarching goal of this program is to increase mutual understanding between people of the United States and people of other countries through exchange. So when you were applying to the US student program for Fulbright, you need to decide on first a country that you want to apply to, one country, and then you also need to decide on the award type that you would like to apply to. So there's two primary award types, the first of those being the study/research grant. So there's about 1,000 of these grants awarded per year for a grant year of 8 to 10 months, and you can travel to any one of 140 countries. And the primary activity that you would be doing over the course of these 8 to 10 months is an independently conducted and designed research project, or studying at the graduate level, or an independent arts project abroad. And then if you apply to an English teaching assistantship, which is what I mentioned that I did, there's a couple hundred more of these that are offered every year, and that would be for a grant year of 8 to 10 months. And you could apply to any one of about 75 countries for that grant. And the primary activity that you'd be completing over the course of the year would be helping to teach English and US culture in the classroom. And that could be anywhere from the kindergarten level to the college level. So when I was teaching English in Columbia, I was working with college students, for example. So to be eligible for this program, you must be either a graduating senior or a recent graduate or a graduate student or an early career professional. And you must also be a US citizen, have your bachelor's degree when you start the program, and you can't have your doctorate at the time of application. And then there's also some country-specific requirements, specifically around language requirements, depending on the country that you apply to. If you're awarded a Fulbright grant, there's a lot of really wonderful benefits, I will say. You will not really have to pay anything out of pocket, which is really wonderful. This includes round-trip airfare, a monthly stipend that includes living fees, travel fees, food fees, etc. And there's often a really good health insurance included as well, including an accident/emergency coverage as well. And then depending on the award type that you apply to and the country that you apply to, there's some other possible benefits, including support for dependents, a research allowance if you do a research grant, tuition if you apply to a study grant, language lessons if you're in a country that doesn't have English as the primary language, and then also some enhancement activities and disability-related accommodations, depending on your situation. And then Fulbright strongly believes that Fulbrighters do not end being Fulbrighters when their grant ends, but that there's continuing benefits over the course of their lifetime. And this includes access to a Fulbright network of alumni, access to the alumni website for Fulbright. Fulbrighters also get 12 months of non-competitive eligibility, which is a special hiring status within the federal government. And then you also get access to the Fulbright email address and the Fulbright Association, which is another network of alumni. So there's a lot of really wonderful benefits, both during the grant and after. In terms of the application process, it is somewhat extended. And so often people start applying in April, May, June, and then we have an internal deadline at OSU at the very beginning of September. So it's a couple months that you're often applying for. And that application process involves an online portal application in which you'll put in basic personal data. That usually includes a list of your extracurriculars, a list of any honors or awards that you have, some information about your academic program. There's also two primary essays that you will be submitting. The first of those being a statement of grant purpose, which will be a little bit longer for research study applicants and a little bit shorter for ETAs. And that will include more detailed information about your proposed study project or about your proposed research project. And for the ETA, that often includes information about your past teaching experiences or your personal teaching style. And then there's also a one-page personal statement, which is a chance for you to showcase a little bit more about yourself and your life to the National Selection Committee. You must also submit 3 references, 3 letters of recommendation. And then depending on the country that you're applying to, there's also a foreign language evaluation that another recommender will have to submit for you, and you'll submit your transcripts as well. And then, as I briefly mentioned, there is an internal process for the Fulbright program, which means that you will first submit your application to us, and then you will have an interview with a faculty committee that we put together. And from that interview, we'll produce this campus committee evaluation form, which is essentially a form that helps the National Selection Committee to better understand who you are and why you're applying. And the goal of that form is really to lift you up and not to tear you down. And then finally, if you are applying to a research study grant, you must obtain an affiliation letter, which essentially means that you need to make contact with a faculty member or with a researcher in the host country that you're applying to. And that person will submit a letter demonstrating their commitment to serve as a mentor to you, to provide any resources that you need, and to really be there for you over the course of your research project. And then finally, the application timeline, as I mentioned, it's somewhat extended. So often we encourage students to start designing their project and preparing their application anywhere from April, May, June into August and September. And then we have a campus deadline that's often at the very end of August or the beginning of September, which means that you'll have to submit your completed application to us. And then we will put together that faculty committee. You will interview with them. And then there'll be a final national application deadline in mid-October in which you'll resubmit your application again. And then your application will go through two processes, the first being, or two phases, the first being the National Screening Committee phase, which is where a US committee will read your application and decide whether to endorse it or not. And if they do endorse it, you will become a semifinalist and they will send it on to the host country, where a host country commission or embassy committee will look at your application and decide if you're going to be a finalist, which means an awardee. And then you'll get your final notification anywhere from March to June, depending on the country that you apply to. So that's a little bit more about the application process. We definitely recommend that if you're considering, reach out to us and we can talk through what the process will look like. And then there's also a ton of ways that you can connect with Fulbright on this slide. And then I'll hand it back over to you, Leanne.
Thank you. So one of the things that I love to tell students who are considering applying for Fulbright is that OSU students can and do win Fulbrights every year. And we're so fortunate to have 3 of them with us this evening, and then a 4th who sent me a really great short video to share about his experience with Fulbright. So I'm just going to pause my screen share so we can all see each other and invite Deng first to talk a bit about his English teaching assistantship experience in Kazakhstan. Welcome, Deng.
Hello, everyone. My name's Dang. So I was a 2-time Fulbrighter ETA at Kazakhstan. I was definitely grateful to have the opportunity. That was my dog. Sorry about that. So yeah, I was a 2-time Fulbright ETA in Kazakhstan. I was very grateful to be able to have the opportunity to do a second Fulbright over there. My main focus was really to help upper level university students, like 3rd, 4th year university students, to enhance their practice with verbal and also auditory English. I basically taught anything from whatever I was interested in with fitness, health, nutrition, philosophy, humanities, anything to really drive their interest, because I really thought that if they were really invested and focused on something, that they can enhance their learning in English. I also diversified in being an ambassador for spelling bees. I did a lot of application. I had like a secret group, a close knit of really highly focused students who were really eager to learn English. And I gave my full investment. There was about, I think, 15 to 20, so that's on the average. I helped them to do their scholarship applications to basically go a full ride to abroad colleges in Europe and some in the United States, and also some summer internships in the United States. So I'm very happy to hear that they were really successful in getting those applications done and moving forward from that. And that was my 2nd year that I really want to hone in and help those kids out. And then lastly, the struggles I had my 1st year being as a Fulbrighter. I knew none of the language. They spoke fully Russian. Landed, don't know who I was going to talk to, don't know where I was going to live, don't know who am I going to engage with, nobody, no connections at all. So I know how you feel for sure, 100% of the time. If you're, scared, you're nervous, everything is going to go wrong. Well, everything did go wrong for me because, I got stuck in the airport for a long period of time. We didn't know if the airplane was going to land in the right airport. The name of the city that we were supposed to land on did not match the city that we were supposed to land on. So I couldn't even read any of the Russian in the airport or speak Russian to people. So again, I understand fully like where you stand when you're scared, but understand every step of the way, there will be somebody who's going to be willing to help you, who's going to support you all the way. And there will be people who will help you. I mean, I'm still here. I'm back in the United States. I'm in one piece. So I'm living proof that, you know, everything will go fine. Just day by day, step by step, things will work out. Just it takes time, honestly. So that's my bit of piece of advice is take things one day at a time. Even when you think everything is in hailstorm and everything's going wrong sideways, it will be better day after day. So take one day at a time.
Dang, what advice would you have for someone who's considering applying for a Fulbright?
Stay a course, meaning be consistent. When I first applied for the Fulbright, Leanne definitely knows how many drafts I wrote up. I wrote at least probably 16 drafts for the, you know, the story, because I couldn't find that story or build that connection. But stay consistent, stay a course, and realize that you gave it your 100% to apply for it. And even here's even a story for you. I wasn't a finalist. I was actually on the wait list. So I gave it my all. I thought I was going to get it, but I'm very thankful that I became a finalist afterwards to be able to become a Fulbrighter going to Kazakhstan. So yeah, give it your all, your 100%. So no regrets, because if you gave it your 100%, and when you get it, you're very grateful you got it because you put the effort in. So that's my number one advice for applications. And my number two is definitely stay a course. There's a pre-departure orientation. It's very imperative that you ask as much questions as you need, especially to the country that you're going to, that previous Fulbrighters has gone to. They will give you so much information from the ground, right? So if you were specifically going to my country, I would tell you all the ins and outs, and you have my full support. I supported the second year Fulbrighters 100% of the way. They weren't afraid, they weren't scared, because they had my phone number, they could contact me. So depending on your situations, that's how I can help you. So those are, I think, two big advices. And then of course, Q&A. Let me know what you got for questions.
One more thing, Dang. It's not that often that someone is invited to stay for a second year. How did that happen for you?
I spread myself way too thin, for sure. Like I said yes to basically everything. I think that's kind of my modern life. I think experience is the way I live life. So in order to experience life, I think saying yes to your own comfort zone and maybe a little bit beyond your comfort zone is the way to go. Because when people say, "Oh yeah, Dang," yeah, I always hear Dang around. He's always around here. He's, you know, your name kind of spreads out throughout the neighborhood, the city, the, you know, ambassadors, the people who you work with. And when there's an opportunity that arises, and they're like, "Yeah, I think, you know, Dang's been around, he's been helpful, he's been, you know, giving value." So they said they needed more Fulbrighters for, you know, second year. I think me and maybe two others had a renewal, and we took that chance because we wanted to, you know, further enhance our goals. And my goal of completing to help my, you know, close, exclusive, highly focused students get what they need, because it was their last year. So those are kind of the things that you could try out. Say yes to things you might not say yes to, and then you get a story, you get a memory, you get to tell people in this panel things happened, but you never knew it happened unless you said yes to it. So.
Thanks, Dang. We're gonna let our other panelists say their piece, and then we'll have time for Q&A. So in sticking with the English teaching assistantship theme, I'd like to invite Andrea to share some of your experience with your program in Romania.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone, welcome. So yeah, I was an ETA in Romania this last academic year. So I was there in September of 2019. And then because of COVID, I had to come back in March. So I didn't get to complete my Fulbright experience, but I was there for around 7 months. And I was placed in a university teaching American studies and culture on the coast of the Black Sea. So it was called Ovidius University, which was perfect for me because my background is actually in marine biology. So I was right on the coast. The first day that I actually looked out at the Black Sea, I saw porpoises swimming around. So I was like, I'm right in the right location, which was amazing. I had picked Romania because I knew I wanted to be somewhere in Europe, and I just narrowed down the countries that only offered ETAs at universities. I didn't want to teach high school or younger students. So for that reason, and then also in doing my research, I found that Eastern European countries are incredibly diverse because they're kind of centralized between Europe, Asia, and the Middle East as well. So I wanted to go to a university that was diverse in the student background because I wanted to step away from STEM for a little bit. I have been trying to branch out my teaching portfolio. I wanted to step into a humanities course for a little bit so that way I can start talking about in a classroom setting things that don't come easy to STEM classes, such as LGBTQ rights, Black, Latinx, Indigenous equities, and issues like that that just don't fit into a science course very well. So Romania was a really good opportunity for that because my student background was like very diverse with European students from Romania, but then also having students from Turkey. I also had some students from like Ukraine as well. And so my goal was to step into this classroom, teach a humanities course, talk about these topics that I don't get to do in a STEMS course, and then sort of brainstorm how to incorporate those active learning techniques and then possibly apply them into a STEM course, into a science course later. So that was sort of the plan. My goal was to incorporate both science and humanities together. So my proposal was to do a sort of a science club. So going out hiking, doing some identification of organisms in the region. But what my big advice to you is to keep an open mind because things are probably going to be different than what you anticipate. Because as soon as I got there, I realized my number of students I had was around 18, of which only 7 could come to class. In Romania, it is not a requirement for students to come to class. So there were often weeks where I would have no students, and then there were some weeks where I would have 1 student. So planning active learning activities is really hard when you only have 1 student. They don't have someone to talk to. So I really had to switch gears a little bit. I still talked about a lot of the topics I wanted to do, but I didn't really get to do some of the active learning that I wanted to do. And I didn't have the opportunities to create the clubs that I wanted to do either. So what I did instead was I just started branching out. I met with several biology professors in the area to see if they were interested in doing some sort of research or would even allow me to teach in their classrooms. So not teaching English, even though that's what my assignment was, just to do something like that. And I ended up finding a marine institute that was in the same location, and I just started volunteering there and working with them pretty regularly, measuring fish that they collected in the Black Sea. We had started to talk about incorporating some outreach, so continuing my teaching practices, but just in that Romanian institute. But of course, COVID hit, so that didn't develop into anything. So yeah, just reiterating my number one advice is have a plan, get excited. It definitely helps with like writing your proposal to have like a really good plan, but also when you finally do get to go, be aware that things are probably not going to work out the way that you had anticipated, but it also creates an opportunity of running into issues that like could turn out better than what you expected. I had no idea that there was a Marine Institute. I could not Google that and figure that out for myself before I got there. But then when I got there, I was really excited to find that and be able to do that research opportunity. Yeah.
Andrea, you make such an important point about things going a little differently than you'd planned. And that is something that comes up a lot in the application process. You're asked to be fairly specific about your expectations for your Fulbright year. but the readers and the selection committee and everyone really knows that things don't always go as planned. And so they really want to know that you've thought about it, that you have a plan, and that if you're doing a research project, especially, that you have in-country support through the mentor that you establish a relationship with. And so, but even then, things are going to change and be different, but that's okay. It's okay. It's expected and it's normal that things change and shift, and your ability to be resilient and adaptable in the face of that kind of change is a really important quality to demonstrate in your application. Did you have any other points that you want to make, Andrea?
Maybe as they come up, that was my main one, was
Okay.
being open-minded to being things changing, and then also being sort of like a yes man, taking on anything that kind of gets thrown at you, because it will present opportunities that you didn't think could be really beneficial.
Okay, well, we're going to switch gears a little bit then and talk about the study research grant. And so I'd like to welcome Omar Sheikh to talk a bit about his Fulbright year in Canada.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a good evening. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for a nice event, Leanne. Thank you to my fellow panelists. I want to start off by saying that the Fulbright's emphasis on cultural engagement was a huge reason I wanted to apply for the scholarship. And part of this is that as a young child, I actually was diagnosed with Becker muscular dystrophy at age 5, which is a neuromuscular condition impacting my use of my legs and my ability to do tasks like heavy lifting. And though I'm fully functional, a lot of my childhood, I spent time learning about how to work with my condition. And as part of that, I did Boy Scouts, and that made me want to see more of the world around me. And growing up with parents and grandparents who lived across the world in many different places, that made me realize I really want to go out and see more of the world. And when I became an Eagle Scout in 2009, it kind of bolstered that spirit even more. I first actually applied to Fulbright in 2015, and I did not get the scholarship until 2019, which is really a testament to how difficult it can be to keep persisting even when there's difficulty. And I actually decided to go to the University of Alberta to research under Professor Toshifumi Yokota in Edmonton, Canada. And there I studied a neuromuscular condition called Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which is like a more severe version of what I have. And in Duchenne, people lose the ability to walk by about age 10, and they usually pass away from heart failure in their 30s. And the goal of my research was to develop therapies to help sustain their livelihood. And essentially, I worked with patient-derived cells, which means that I was working with very fragile cells that required very precise technique. So work was difficult, but very rewarding. However, I got a big shock in mid-March when I learned that things were shutting down and the labs were closing too. And if I continued to work, it would likely have to be thrown away. I made one last step towards performing work, but in the end, it's still thrown. However, I learned a lot from my experience from going there. And even to this day, I'm still continuing on some of the research I started there, including literature reviews. But I want to actually talk a little bit about the preparations to go to another place. In Edmonton, there was a week where it was minus 40 degrees Celsius. And we could rightfully joke that we were in the Arctic because of those weather conditions. And I actually had to prepare a lot before going. Because of my mobility limitation, I had to understand accessibility offered institutionally at the university in Edmonton and at Canada. And before I even came, I'd talk to people and understand where's a good place to live close to my research? How can I manage things like when there's snow and I use a mobility scooter? And I also did things like bring many winter jackets and scarves, including a winter coat my father wore 30 years ago when he lived in Montreal. So preparation was really key for living in a place like Edmonton, which can go from no snow at all to all of a sudden heavy snowfall. And that made it a really exciting time for me. So I'd like to finally talk more about the cultural engagement, because I do feel that is a very important and even somewhat underrated part of Fulbright, because we often think about how can I go and do my job, but but the Fulbright makes it so your job is not all you're aiming for, and that makes it very powerful. And one thing I did when I went to Canada is I expected to join Toastmasters group there to work on my public speaking and continue what I've started here in Oregon. And that was expected for me, and I did that rather easily. I found a club right on campus, which was excellent. But like Dang and Andrea pointed out, you have to keep an open mind, and not just for things like, handling -4 degrees Celsius weather, but also keeping an eye out. You can find things you don't expect. And one thing I found at the University of Alberta was Japanese Conversational Club, which I found out by accident somewhere about 2 months after I'd got into Canada. And that ended up being one major activity. Lastly, for cultural engagement is actually the part I proposed for my Fulbright application. I said that I would connect with officials, disability rights advocates, and even groups like Muscular Dystrophy Canada to do outreach while there. And it actually took a lot more time than I expected. And this is another point of important advice, that when you want to do cultural engagement, especially around outreach, it takes a lot of time, as Dang pointed out rather well. And I had to keep working, but I found out that Alberta has an Office of Advocacy for People with Disabilities, and I met with them early in 2020. So it goes to show that if you keep working, you can find out that even if it takes time, you can build those relationships, and you can even continue activities and also find new ones as well. And this is all in addition to doing research. And for me, they went together very well. And I think the last part I want to talk about is, as other panelists have alluded to, is the COVID experience. Now, for me, leaving Canada was relatively easy. I actually waited until basically the last day I could before the border shut down on March 24th. And actually, my older sister bought the ticket saying, "It's decided, you're coming." And this was difficult for me because I expected support from my parents who would help me move in. And now all of a sudden I was moving without their support, and I had to basically pack as if I was my mother rather than me. And that's a little different. But one thing surprising that helped is I talked to the professor and the lab postdoc, and they're able to help me take my things to the airport and take my mobility scooter to the airport without having to worry about dragging each individual suitcase. And in the end, I found that I'm still keeping up with research and cultural engagement, which is a testament to how powerful this Fulbright experience was for me, even though it ended so abruptly. And I also had the experience of leaving 3 months early, as I believe the other panelists can attest to as well. So thank you so much for your time and listening.
Thank you, Omar. I have one follow-up question for you that I think will be of interest to anyone who's considering a study research grant. Obviously, your host country mentor or partner is really, really important to your success as a researcher and just to get settled in your host location. How did you initially connect with Dr. Yokota, and how did you establish a relationship with him from a distance?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. So Leanne actually knows the answer to this question, but I'll give it for anyone who doesn't actually know. So I first met a colleague of Dr. Yokota's, whose name is Professor Hong Moulton at Oregon State University. She gave a lecture for one of my classes as an undergraduate. I ended up coming back as a graduate student, and I was hoping to work with Professor Moulton. But one day she invited her colleague, Dr. Yokota, who does similar work to her, to come speak. And I was really impressed at how well he knew his research and how he held him help and how effectively he's able to teach us about his research. And afterwards, I got to talk with him a little bit. And sometime later, when I was reapplying for Fulbright, I believe my third application cycle, I reached out to him and asked for his support. And to my great gratitude, he gave it. And I don't remember exactly how it happened that I emailed him, if I did it explicitly with the connection, But I do remember it being a wonderful experience. And especially when I saw his letter of affiliation, said, you know, I really enjoyed meeting Omar, a very bright young man. So it kind of brought things full circle. And I think it speaks to how important connections can be for Fulbright.
Thanks, Omar. So we do have one more study research perspective to share by video, but I think now would be a good time to pause for some questions. So feel free to unmute and verbalize your question, or feel free to pop it in the chat if you prefer.
Hi, I have a question for Dang, I guess for all of you guys who have gone and done the Fulbright. So you talked about arriving and not having a place to stay and knowing what to do. I mean, how did you go about solving that? And I guess what was your first week like in Kazakhstan?
All right, yeah. So first things first, they did have a person that would assist you to first go to a hotel or a place to stay as temporary, and then slowly integrate in helping you find apartments. But again, you can actually do this before you even fly there. So get to know your environment, like which is like your, maybe if you're going to an institute, maybe know your professors or people you might be engaging with in the future, and then get acquainted via virtually or email, having some sort of basis. And then understanding, hey, asking them, is there any apps, is there any websites that look at apartments or flats in the nearby area? Or even ask them, is there any nearby apartments that are available nearby that institute? That gives you a broader sense of where you want to live. And of course, locals have a better understanding of location, right? Location is everything, especially at your convenience. So those are a few things. Of course, for me, I didn't have any of that. I just kind of went there and went with the flow as things continued and progressed in a good nature of finding a place to stay. And again, if you didn't like your original place, you can again move to a different place because you got acquainted to the area and now you're like, oh, this seems like, I don't like this neighborhood. You want to move to a different one, you can switch. For us, we didn't really have like actual contracts. It's more of a verbal contract. It's very old school over there. So it's a word of trust over there. So of course, and there's a lot of face value over there. So some people, this person might be the relative of this person, might be working as a colleague in my department. And then they're like, dang, how come you just like left and you didn't even tell the landlady? She was my auntie of my other friends, cousins or whatnot. So, you know, it's a lot of face values in Kazakhstan. So that's kind of like the little tips and tricks. So open up to anybody else who has more advice on this.
Yeah, I see we've got some comments going on the chat, but I'll just give my 2 cents that as someone with my mobility limitations, of course, in general, planning to live somewhere else, I actually talked to the university and I made plans to live on campus or close to campus. I talked with them. I thought I identified the right place for me. But when I got there in person, I realized that this was actually not the best fit because it had like very kind of weird stairs. It relatively split off from other places. I ended up asking like, hey, can I live somewhere else? And I ended up living in the newest place. And even though I made those preparations, when you get there, it can be different. So it's important to find people, as many as you can, to help you navigate that. And I also talked to my professor to get insight into where people in his lab were living. So I think that's definitely very powerful. I mean, that's definitely a very good thing to keep in mind, that even though I went to Canada, which is, you know, relatively similar to the US, I still had some challenges that weren't entirely expected.
I'll just finish off and say that there's lots of resources for you that once you have a better idea of where you're going or the institution you'll be staying at. I talked with a previous Fulbrighter who was at the same university as me. And so she had a house, she had a really good relationship with her landlord. So she just put me in contact with her landlord, and I just moved into the same apartment as them. And it worked out really well because then she also left me things like cooking materials and appliances. Basically the landlord just held on to them for 3 months. And then when I arrived, they gave them to me. So that's like an opportunity. Also, like your mentors or whoever you're affiliated with at your university will likely help you as well. It's in the budget. I don't think there's like a very clear breakdown, but it is in the budget for like a good source of money for you to also live in country in a hotel for a week or 2 weeks while you hunt and actually house hunt and or apartment hunt. So yeah, it's something that I didn't stress out a lot about it. But in talking to other Fulbrighters in my country, I realized that it was actually a very smooth transition. But I do wonder if every country is a little bit different. So in Romania, again, it's like sort of in the budget for like the sort of transition period where you can stay in a hotel or an Airbnb for a period of time while you look for something. But I wonder if maybe some countries are different.
There's also a question about living in town or commuting from a little bit further away in order to perhaps save a little bit of the budget. Does anybody have any advice about that?
I can speak a little bit to that because in particular, I actually lived about 10 minutes away, and by design, I wanted to not live too far. And I found that I could reasonably pay for where I lived with the stipend I got from Fulbright. And that may not be true for everyone because each country will be a little bit different. And it'll even depend where you are. Because I know people who went to Fulbright Canada, went to Canada for Fulbright, and they were living in Vancouver. They had a hard time, but in Edmonton, it's relatively easy. But I think it'll depend on your preferences. And for me, like I just wanted to make sure I wasn't too far in case there was snow or in case, for example, it's a very cold day. And so that 10-minute distance worked very well for me.
I can sort of add on to that. I initially lived further away. I had about a 15-minute bus ride commute, and it could be extended to a half hour depending on the frequency of the bus. So I would say I hated that experience, especially since I had instances where I wouldn't have students show up to class. So I hated having to do that very long commute to go to class and then not have anyone show up and then having to commute back. So I eventually, after 2 months, moved to an apartment that was walking distance to the university. So, I mean, it, of course, like every country and city is going to be different, but I would say like from my personal experience, I really liked being walking distance from where I was working in case things didn't work out. So yeah.
So for budgeting, what was the question about budgeting, right?
Really, if it makes sense to live closer or further away from your daily destination to save some money.
So I second Omar. My country is and can go to negative 40 degrees Celsius. I wouldn't recommend what I did. I'm a little more crazy. I wanted to be tolerant of the cold. So I live pretty close. We were walking distance, but it still takes about half an hour, especially when it's like negative 40. And we could take the tram to our place, which is about maybe 5 stops. And tram is like half a penny. So it's not so bad to take the tram to go to my university. For my country, it's very affordable. I think if I can definitely live within a year with $5,000. Like housing, food, transportation is within my city. Within that $5,000, like everything is covered for sure. But if you want to live, I think have an ideal, write down what you want in your kind of area. So would you want something that's close to gyms or like grocery stores? And sometimes the institute itself is very far from that. So understanding what things you need and what you want, and that location being close to things that you really need, have that in consideration too, on top of it being close to institute. Because I mean, food over institute, I'm going to choose food because, you know, I need to cook, I need to survive. So I'd rather have a grocery store nearby than to, live close to the institute.
In my case, I was actually fortunate enough to be both within about 10 minutes. Unfortunately, there weren't the same 10 minutes, but in my case, I was able to kind of get both relatively close.
So one of our guests in this presentation is a freshman. And in the chat, we have some really great questions about how to prepare early to be competitive for a Fulbright. So I'd love to hear some of your perspectives on that. And I'll just share a few thoughts first. First of all, I love talking to freshmen, so I'm so glad you're here. There's a lot that you can do to be preparing, even to apply many years in advance. You can be thinking about where you would want to go. And if you're planning to do a study research project, I see that you're interested in medical research. You can be networking with your professors and mentors here at OSU to make international connections and starting to reach out to some potential research mentors in other countries. You can be working on your essays early. We have lots of insights to share about that. So it's really never too early to start. And we'd love to meet with you this year to talk about how to lay the groundwork for a successful application later. The other thing to think about is that there are two types of Fulbright that are available to undergraduates. So primarily what we're talking about here is the postgraduate Fulbright, but there is a UK Summer Institute available through the Fulbright program. It's open to first and second year students, so that's one to look up. And the other is a partnership with Canada, where you can get a stipend to do a summer research project sponsored by Fulbright in connection with a host institution anywhere in Canada. So that's something you could apply for as usually a second or third year student, whereas the UK Fulbright is open to first and second year students. So do any of our panelists have advice for a freshman preparing to apply for Fulbright?
I think what's being said in the chat, I think, is very helpful. One thing I would think about is think about where you would like your Fulbright to take you. And that's not necessarily going to know right away. You may not even know it when you come time for your Fulbright or even at the end. But it's important to think about where exactly you want your Fulbright to take you. And I see that you're interested in medical research. So one thing may be to develop an idea of what's research that really excites you and where do people do that research and how can you get connections to people who do that research that excites you, especially abroad. And it's a lengthy process either way, but you could spend those next few years thinking about, this is the exact kind of project that would really make me excited for a study research project in particular. Because even once you've got an idea, it'll take a lot of time to refine it. And I find that the essays do take time, but a lot of the time is more on the intellectual side, thinking about, this is what I want from a Fulbright. This is what I hope to get from a Fulbright. Hope that helps.
And to Omar's point earlier also about host country engagement, that's something that you do outside of the bubble of your research project. So it's a matter of thinking about, what do you enjoy, or what would you do to meet and socialize with people in your host country? What are things that you do here that could translate to the host country, or something new that the host country offers that you've never had a chance to do before? But the important thing is that it brings you in contact with people, and that mission is just as important to Fulbright as supporting the academic research project that you proposed.
I also think it's important to network within the realms of your Oregon State University. See what resources you already have at Oregon State University, which can expand your horizon beyond the current country of the United States. And there are plenty of opportunities. You could probably join the pre-med email listserv if you're doing medical related. If you're looking for a specific niche, ask around. Leanne is a good resource individual, and then there might be someone she could recommend you to that could guide you to the right person that you need. I remember I wanted to do a master's in gastronomy, so basically food, in Italy. I think it was Italy or Spain, I don't remember. But I literally was a private investigator, like a PI, looking for this one person in the whole entire university that is direct ties to the director of that university in Italy. So you never know. You never know what connections you might have at Oregon State. It's a big school, and there's a lot of people, and that people might know other people, you know. So look within your network that's close by.
Here's another great question. What was your experience making friends in the host country?
So I guess we could start from kind of basic level that I was talking about cultural engagement, and that's actually another avenue for trying to make friends. And a lot of cultural engagement will be on the informal side. So it might be, for example, like when I went to Toastmasters, I actually made friends because we had similar interests that keep going, and the people who would also keep going would start to recognize me that I keep going. This is also true for my experience with Japanese Conversational Club. And there's also avenues for making friends through, if, for example, if you live on campus or even if you live in an apartment, find people near you. And in particular, there are a lot of events to bring us together. Like for my dorm, we had an event for a floor. I called it floor plus formal. And we also had other things like board game nights. And I find that a lot of those activities, even though it's rather simple to think about, helps you make friends, especially as you continue to see people. And there's also, you make friends by engaging with your lab mates or your peers or students, and engaging with people around you. I will say it can be very difficult to make friends, especially lasting friends. And I found that I had a very hard time with making friends until around December, January in my grant, which was a few months out.
So being an ETA, there was a big number of us that were all coming in. So I think there was like 10 or 12 of us. So we all kind of leaned on each other, especially initially, because we all had the same schedules. We all were visiting the country for the first time. So we essentially pretty much from like day one when we all met for the first time, even though none of us knew whether or not we actually liked each other, we were starting to plan like, all right, what are we doing for this school break? When are we doing for this other school break? So we had like our entire itinerary just planned out to travel. So yeah, I became friends with like colleagues and Fulbrighters right off the bat. And then as I sort of lived in my area, which there were no other Fulbrighters, it was just me, which is common. I then also started to talk to other PhD students within the college. And so then I became very close with another PhD student in Romania, who then introduced me to other people as time went on. So I had like my Romanian friends in my city, and then I had my Fulbrighter friends. So yeah, engaging in activities, I think, is a good way of meeting people. There's things like apps that you can use. I think even like Airbnb has like an option where instead of staying at a place, you can just say you're in an area. And so then you can find other people who are also in the area. There's ways to meet people through apps and online little groups and hobbies. It just depends on the country, because I think in Europe, like there was a lot of things like Erasmus is a common diversity, like a bunch of European students who are traveling around can meet each other, but I don't know if like that exists in every single country or continent. So you kind of have to look into it.
Yeah, I actually wanted to add on to something that you remind me of. There's actually another Fulbright Canada student at the University of Alberta, and I actually met her at the Fulbright Canada orientation, and then later we finally met up in person in Edmonton, and that ended up being kind of a lasting friendship. I made a lot of lasting friendships. I'm still engaging with like this friend, but I also, with the other Fulbright Canada people, we made a WhatsApp group to try and keep in touch. I think it's fallen a little bit silent, but given the way the world is, it's understandable. And I think in my case, I have a unique experience because I've been continuing to do Toastmasters and the Japanese club with people in Canada. So I've been able to keep the friendships alive that way.
So definitely, I think I think it's always important to set your intentions. If you truly do want to meet friends in a different country, that you will potentially find a way or will to find friends there. For my sake, I remember telling for my second year as a Fulbrighter, so basically I think 2019 Fulbrighters, I told one of the Fulbrighters, they asked me the same thing. They're like, hey, how do you do it? How do you meet new people, even if you don't speak the language or if it's really difficult to engage? I said, you find the set intentions and you will potentially find best friends throughout the whole thing. And I remember she told me this story. She was on the plane flying from somewhere to directly to Kazakhstan. And there was a Kazakh student. No, I think, yes, yeah, student. And she was like, hey, can you tell me more about Kazakhstan? I'm having troubles finding this place. And they kicked it right up from the plane until the end of the Fulbright experience. Actually, maybe a little early because of COVID. But they became super good friends, went out to brunch, went to coffees, did things together. She introduced her friends and then she became part of a group. And then she met with people who are from the same culture as her, same cultural background as her. She got really close there. And she's like, dang, I'm so thankful that you said, just set your intentions and really go after it when you really want to. Because I think at the end of the day, if you're maybe an introvert, you might not want to have so many friends. You might just want to invest in like one or two. For me, I'm very thankful. The people who assisted me in the very beginning of my first year Fulbright, they became my best buds for the whole 2 years. I know their family. I've been to their farms. I've been to their village. I've met all of their members. I met, some K and Bs. Hopefully this is not connected to the Russian, intercom stuff. But you never know. But for me, I love to go in deep. I don't like to really have kind of acquaintance level relationships. I really like to get to know my people really close if I really truly want to know them. And again, I never know what to expect from them. I still communicate with them through WhatsApp, still asking how their family's doing. And I've had family dinners with them. We've had close chats, deep discussions, help them what they need, like practice their English or give them opportunities. So it's really how much you want to invest in to develop relationships. And of course, I have acquaintances through my engagements and talks and panelists and everything. But at the end of the day, do you want a lot of friends or you want just a few that you want to be comfortable and just be yourself around with? It's up to you, right? So it's your taste, your spectrum.
Well, we're getting towards the end of our time, but there's a really great final question that if we could quickly address, I think it would be great. The question is, did you take foreign language classes during your Fulbright, and did you feel like you gained conversational skill?
So I can attest to this one pretty directly because I started doing Japanese Conversational Club, and that gave me a chance to teach people who are not native English speakers, including Japanese people, but also other people studying internationally in Canada, teach them English while I learned Japanese. And I found it really difficult, but it was actually the thing that kind of kickstarted me in going to learn Japanese. I started in Canada learning the alphabet of the Japanese alphabet, and from there I've continued to grow and grow, and I still participate in that club. So I do definitely feel like I gained a conversational skill from studying a foreign language over my Fulbright.
I really didn't have a choice, really. I have to survive. So I learned through survival. I think it's very good, but because I get to empathize with the students that are learning English, because I'm literally at their level sometimes because I'm at zero. So I can always give them that first person point of view that I know it's going to be tough. I know you're going to be scared. You might get it incorrect or you might look stupid, the whole spectrum. But I had to survive. So I'm going to have to look stupid or survive. So I'd rather survive. I don't care what I look if I'm going to make stupid mistakes. But at the end of the day, I think for me, I had to make it a requirement to stay consistent and really be able to converse. I mean, I'm able to survive, meaning I can engage with people speaking Russian enough to get by, but it's not like I can have deeper conversation with people in Russian. So that was the first year of Fulbright. Second year, they finally opened up and saying, oh, we're gonna have English as a universal language. So now people start being like, oh, I have to speak English now. And everyone started to speak English. But my first year, nobody spoke English because that was the official language, Russian was. And I think, yeah, if you want to survive and you want to get food, yeah, you're gonna have to learn the language and say, I'm gonna point at this and somehow how much does this cost and buy it. So it's a way of survival.
I wish I had a better question for this because I really wanted to learn a foreign language when I lived abroad. I tried using Duolingo to learn Romanian before I went. And then when I got there, I found out that Duolingo mispronounces a lot of things and pronunciation is huge in Romanian. So it almost didn't work out at all. But I was lucky in the sense that pretty much everyone 30 and younger speaks English in Romania. 30 years ago, when they got their independence, they started to teach English in school. So I was able to get by with some exceptions of I needed to learn enough Romanian to like read the menu. But yeah, I wanted to learn Romanian, and it's an incredibly challenging language that I tried to stick it out like for the first couple of months and tried to communicate with people, but it was just because they knew English so much better than I knew basic Romanian, I had to give up and just speak English the whole time. I wish I had a better answer.
And just to add on, I think it's important to find a if you really truly want to learn the language, find a quality tutor. I didn't have that opportunity. I just said, hey, do you know anybody who's willing to volunteer? And when you say volunteer, it's very tough when people's schedules are like super tough already, and they're like giving you this much amount of time, and it's not that quality investment. So I would, because I think Fulbrighters, if you're doing ETA, you have actually a specific amount of assistantship for learning languages. So find a quality tutor if you're really eager to learn, and that gives you accountability because you have somebody who's teaching you.
I guess the other thing I want to add on quickly is just that if you can find ways to learn a language, not just through a tutor formally, but also conversationally, even if it's definitely going to be challenging, I think that can help learn a language as well, to help people help you learn, but not just in the strict sense, but in kind of like help you push at your boundaries a little bit, but in a casual sort of way.
Yeah, to add on to Omar, it was one of my best, I guess, conversations are with babushkas who are selling like groceries and like cashiers. They always see the foreigner because I somehow, have a vibe of being a foreigner. They're always so happy that I'm speaking their language and conversing with them. So even though I sound stupid, they're like, oh, I'm so glad you're speaking our language and, engaging with this culture. And they always give me the best crops, like, hey, we got this. These are fresh. Enjoy these. So, benefits of practicing conversationally in your day-to-day life.
Well, this Q&A has been so interesting and helpful. I didn't want to interrupt it to show a video. So since I promised another perspective on study research, we're out of time. But if anyone on this Zoom wants to see it, just let me know and I can gladly share it with you. The other person we're going to share is, his name is Kai Parker. And he was a PhD student at the time when he did his Fulbright to Chile. He's in engineering and initially went to study tsunami hazards, but ended up doing something a little bit different, I think with respect to coastal erosion. So just let me know if you'd like to see it. I'll gladly share it. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you to our panelists for sharing all of your wisdom